somebody out of business. Those things happen, especially when you've got projects that are guaranteed by multiple parties at multiple tiers in the supply chain. A mistake propagates through the whole system, and it costs everybody money and time. Hi, I'm Michael Wright. I'm the founder and chief strategy officer of RedTeam Software. I'm a commercial general contractor, and I've been in this business for nearly 30 years. One of the first things that we really looked at as a new general contractor was obtaining bonding capacity, which is a big deal in the construction business. Most people don't know commercial contractors essentially personally guarantee the work that they do. They have a lot on the line. Construction projects are risky, they're difficult, it's a very challenging industry. You know, people that are in the business for a long time, they love the business. And I would say that today. You know, I love the business of construction. It's really a great industry, but it is very risky. So this was the mid-90s. We did not have cell phones or live applications that were tracking pictures. It was a challenge for me, thinking about all the activity going on in the field that I didn't necessarily know about. One of the first things we did is we built a system just to store the pictures being taken on job sites and add the additional context needed to really understand what was being depicted in that image. We ended up building a web application so that superintendents would be able to load those photos from somewhere else other than having to drive back to the office. And so that was really the first thing that we built that ultimately became RedTeam Software. So uploading the photos was really helpful. What we ended up doing is adding more information, additional fields into the forms that were being completed by our superintendents, and ultimately they became daily reports. The daily report is the most important document that we keep. And documenting what you do, what you say, and what things transpire on the job site is really what makes the difference between a successful project and an unsuccessful project. Next, we looked at using the platform to generate standardized contract documents. At this time and to this day, I think most contractors generate their contract documents manually. That, to me, is a very risky proposition because you've got essentially bespoke documents being used as contracts. If you want to scale your business, the key is predictability and having a reliable, repeatable infrastructure. So a system to generate the contract documents was one of the next things that we started building in the application. 10 years into the growth of the business and the building of this application to support us, we did have a sense that, you know, we have a competitive advantage. We would hear from our business partners, from our clients, from our subcontractors. They would say, you know, we don't know any other contractors that have a system like this. It clearly helped us be more successful, and, you know, it impacted our lives. This technology was transformational for us. RedTeam is actually a very different solution than what our competitors are offering. The fact that I am a commercial general contractor, you know, we have a sensitivity to what's needed in the product that, quite frankly, our competitors just don't have. They're not commercial GCs. And there's two schools of thought on this. You know, our competitors, they'll say, we have a solution that allows you to manage your projects the way you want to manage them. Our approach has been a little bit different. Our goal was to manage the business. We're not just built to support decisions, we're built actually to manage the source transactions themselves. And so we actually produce the contract documents ready for signature. We authorize the disbursements. We bill the clients. RedTeam enables the standard repeatable processes that allow you to grow your business and create real enterprise value. Reach out and schedule a demo.
So that's a little bit about RedTeam, which hopefully you guys are all very familiar with, intimately familiar with. Well, thank you so much for being here tonight. I wanted to wish everyone a good evening, and thank you for being here. We're excited because we're going to have a conversation and talk about something that every contractor in this room has experienced, which is financial blind spots. We've found that these don't just come from bad systems. They come from how teams operate and how processes are followed and how technology is actually used in the real world. So tonight we're going to break that down a little bit and talk through some blind spots, what they are costing you and how to actually fix them. At the center of it, it's actually some company culture. So because construction companies are built on culture, we're going to have our guest speakers joining me tonight. But my name is Traci. I'm the Vice President of RedTeam Go Client Relations. And I say that I accidentally fell into the technology side of construction. My background is I come from I'm a fourth generation general contractor in my family, actually. So I heard Joe talking about the mall building. My great-grandfather probably built one. So I come from a long line of construction. So construction is my first passion. I went to school and got a master's degree in construction management and was a project manager for 10 years before my accidental trip and fall into the construction technology realm. But I, as a project manager, was in charge of implementing RedTeam Go product for the company that I worked for at the time. So have experience being in your shoes of how do we adopt technology and implement a software. And so now my passions are construction and technology and how it helps our businesses to grow and be more efficient. So joining me tonight are people that I'm realizing that you guys know very well. Annette Bain is sitting here to my left. Annette is she has a very unique background in this space. She started as a carpenter, moved into accounting, became a controller, and now works as a construction accounting consultant. She's been in the industry since the early days of construction software, from DOS systems all the way to cloud-based platforms like RedTeam. So she's seen firsthand how these challenges have evolved. Today, she works directly with contractors, helping them improve financial processes, reporting, and system alignment. And we're very excited to have you join us today. Thank you. Next to her is Suzy Grider. Many of you know Suzy as well. She has worked for both RedTeam and T&G in the HR department, and she brings a really important perspective on how culture impacts our companies and our organizations, not just in theory, but in hiring and leadership within the organization. She's going to help us connect how culture directly impacts our team accountability, alignment, and ultimately the financial outcomes. Thank you for being here, Suzy. All right, so let's start with where this actually breaks down. When we talk about our financial blind spots, they usually don't start with one big failure. They start with small breakdowns that add up. So Annette, from your experience with working with contractors on a regular basis, where do you see things start to break down?
Working with commercial general contractors for, I'm not going to tell you how many years, there's several really small things that can slowly, quietly erode the relationship between the project team and accounting. That can, if you're not careful, create silos. Two of those you will recognize. Two of those I have helped many of your companies with, hopefully helped. The first one being late and missing timesheets. Getting those timesheets from the field. And I know, I worked for Intuit for a while, and I remember I hated those timesheets. So I understand how you feel in the field or as a project manager. Sometimes it may feel like it's an unnecessary, stressful waste of time, especially when you're doing them late and somebody's asking for them. But I think the timesheets, accounting has to communicate to operations into the field, but the timesheets are more important than just payroll and getting paid, even though that's certainly important. The timesheets are what allow us to job cost the job properly and to come up with an estimate at complete, which is key. One of the biggest risk factors I find in budgeting is that labor cost. So the timesheets are more than just a necessary evil, I do find. One thing that I think is non-optional is having a timesheet that's mobile, that's pre-filled with jobs and cost codes to make it easy to do. And both of our RedTeam products do that, provide that, and it should be non-optional. The other thing that I see, the second thing that I see, and we all love them, gosh, we love our credit cards, don't we? Getting those credit card receipts is a real challenge. And it's really important. One of the things I think about with credit cards, they're the artifacts. And what we fall into so often is entering an authorization after the fact. And entering them receipt by receipt, because accounting wants the thing. We need the receipts, we need them posted into RedTeam so that they'll flow into QuickBooks or whatever ERP you're using, so we can do our reconciliations and produce our books. So they're really important. one of the things that we can do in construction is, I know we've got a couple of estimators in the room, is in the estimate is to provide a line item for unexpected expenses. So that we have, instead, when we create those labor authorizations, we don't create them charge at a time. I recommend creating one labor authorization for the month, because we reconcile credit cards monthly, and use that same line item from estimating 1 month for each cost code. And that way you're not constantly creating these labor authorizations over and over again, and usually after the fact. In accounting, we call that forensic accounting or post-mortem accounting, which means it's too late. You can't do anything about it. You know, so the credit cards do create a lot of conflict, I find, between accounting. You know, we're often perceived as the bad guys. And then accounting is just as guilty of perceiving the operations in the field as the people that just spend money recklessly, which we know is not true. I do think it requires empathy. I try to remind myself and the accounting departments that I work with that in operations, they're out there building things. You know, they're dealing with subcontractors and owners and inspections and weather. And we're in a nice, cozy office doing accounting. But accounting is tough too. And these silos can really affect the culture of an office.
You and I were talking about, when we were doing our prep for this meeting, you were talking to me about the fact that you guys rarely got out into the field from the accounting team, but that you guys had made it a point to go out and visit a job site so that you could see what's going on in the field and meet with the people there and kind of understand what the day in the life of a superintendent looks like, to create that sense of empathy within the organization, and then vice versa for the superintendents in the field to understand what goes on the accounting side of things, and the fact that we have audits and we have to have receipts, and this is why this is important for you to turn these in. And just having that understanding about how all the different roles within the organization really do play a part in the financial outcome of a job, when we have everything that we need tied to the job costs and an accurate job cost statement at the end of the day. So I do think that that's really important, and that goes into a little bit of the company culture and how do we as an organization help our teams that live in silos get to know each other and respect each other and get us all rowing in the same boat so that at the end of the day, the jobs are profitable. So
I would say that seeing the physical project has a big impact on everybody. I think it brings people together. Back before COVID, the auditors would come once a year and we would get to go to Miami and tour the projects. But we don't do that anymore. But I loved it. It makes us a team. And you see the effort of all of our combined work. It really pulls us together. And there's nothing more fun than an accounting class, you know, to bring the team in for Accounting 101 and thank you, I appreciate that. Hey, if you have food, they will come, you know?
That's right. I always tell people when we're doing our superintendent training, just bring them in for a lunch and learn. Tell them there's food, make it at 3:30 so there can be beer, and then you can send them home. We'll do it on a Friday afternoon. Well, I want to transition just a little bit and talk about another area about bridging relationships with our subcontractors as well. We have operations as we're trying to keep projects moving, and accounting trying to collect project compliance, and we're dealing with cash flow. And when those things are aligned or are not aligned, things can get really tense. So I wanted to have you speak to us a little bit about how and where you've seen our relationships with our subcontractors hit some pitfalls in the account.
Yeah, I'd love to. Because the company culture, it extends beyond your co-workers in the company. The third party, especially our subcontractors, are part of that culture, and even our owners that we're building. I think one of the biggest pains that I run across is when the subcontractor is billing using a schedule of values that doesn't align with the general contractor's buyout and their schedule of values. And RedTeam's team player and Go, it has a contractor portal. Their portal goes a long way towards making that work. We all know what happens when payments are delayed. And we know why they're delayed. Missing documents, change orders, verbal change orders or undocumented change orders or change orders that are not put into the system, missing lien waivers. You know, there's a lot of things that can delay a payment, and delaying payments is really tough. It creates stress between operations and accounting because we're holding up for an insurance certificate or a final or a waiver, and the subcontractor. So I think there's no question that the GC that pays their subs timely and accurately has a huge competitive advantage in the marketplace. And it comes back to culture and to treating the subcontractors like part of the family, because they are, and also the subcontractors performing and getting the job done, knowing that they'll get paid. I find that I don't think that payment promises should ever be made in the field, because there's too much paperwork, there's too much compliance that needs to be verified by accounting. Pay when paid is the rule in our game of commercial construction, and I see occasionally where people will break that rule and pay us up early, and I know it's tempting, and you know there may be times that you have to do that, but that should be avoided at all costs. It makes the situation worse. And it affects your progress billing, your percentage of completion. And I think that if we delay the payouts that the subs provide, we've got to make sure the subs do bill us on time. It reduces our cost. And, you know, I always remember Mike Wright always saying, in percentage of completion accounting, cost is revenue. You know, so if your cost is delayed, whether it's because you're missing timesheets or you're missing credit card receipts or your subs haven't billed, your percentage of completion is down, which reduces your revenue, you know, and it can really mess with your cash flow on the project. I like to look at each job as a profit center, as its own little company, and look at its cash flow the same way, your payables, your receivables, your estimate at complete.
I was talking with the Foleys earlier about contracts and how important it is to have specific language in your contract agreements. That pay when paid is one of those clauses that's a must, in my opinion, of having. And then the other is, you know, if we want them to be turning in their payments by a certain date, we've got to put it in the contract as well. Like, they've got to turn in their bills through Team Player. Take it out of the accountant's realm of responsibility to have those entered in and put it into the accountability that is going to be part of the culture of the relationship that we as the GC have with our subcontractors in an effort to get them paid on time. Because if we don't have to spend the time doing the paperwork and entering in the bills for our subcontractors, we can spend more time doing the business development and winning more jobs and keeping our subcontractors busy. It's all a part of that team dynamic as we are running our businesses. So I think that's an important part of the teamwork as well. All right, so let's talk about how things break down if we're not hitting our numbers and what those impacts are on our businesses. Annette, what do you see as our biggest impacts to not hitting our numbers?
The whip. The whip is a beautiful thing. I mean, it really is, if you think about it. You know, if you look at a whip, you can watch a project move all the way from the left side all the way to the right. We start with a budget and change orders, and then we make it to a contract, and then we have buyout, and we have job cost. I mean, it's really exciting. And then you have estimate to complete and estimate at complete and percent complete and billing. I mean, it is really cool. I love to see a project that is current and the cost is current, and to look at the WIP. And the WIP will tell you way up front before you end up in forensic accounting when you're in trouble. But the over and under billing directly, of course, impacts our revenue, impacts the company's cash flow, impacts the relationship, the culture that we have with our client. So I think that pulls it all together. You've got the change orders, both upstream and downstream, you know, keeping those change orders documented, executed, and tracking the cost for those change orders. View the change orders as a profit center. You can either lose on the change orders, or you can, it's another opportunity to make some more money. I think you have to remember that when the field and the office align, when the field and the books align, the profits will follow. They really will. that makes a huge impact.
So a lot of times our companies try to fix some of these pitfalls that we run into with better systems. You are all here because you use or know about RedTeam software, but that's only part of the story, having the tools in our tool belt to actually accomplish the job. But where it really works well is when we have alignment. Of course, with all of our project team members, we've got shared visibility, real-time data that happens when we're using a cloud-based software like our systems. We know clear ownership of whose responsibility is it at what time during the project, which is wonderful. And then we've got connected systems. We have some integrations that are really helpful, especially our accounting integrations and getting transactional information from RedTeam over to our accounting software. So we know that that's all a part of our processes that we put in place, but that's not all of it. We know that none of that works without company culture built internally, and how you guys lead by example and what you hold your internal company employees accountable to. And that's all made up by our company culture. So Suzy, I want to bring you into the conversation and talk a little bit about how does culture influence whether teams actually take ownership of the data in their processes?
Well, I think companies can underestimate the power of their culture. And is your team member going to see the data as a priority, as something they can take ownership of? Are they going to see the numbers that belong in accounting, or something that they can be responsible and accountable for? So we want to create an environment for our employees where they can communicate, they are clear what we expect from them, how their part impacts the bigger picture, and so that they can engage with the company that way. They can be accountable, we can hold them responsible. And I think as companies, we can always improve on communicating to our employees so that things aren't a surprise to them when they're not meeting our expectations or not being accountable for what they're accountable for. So there's a lot of things that we can provide as a company for our employees, that we can create a relationship where they can succeed and we can be profitable at the same time.
How do you actually build the shared accountability across teams? How would you say?
You know, my experience with T&G and RedTeam is we want to communicate to our employees, and they need to be clear. And it sounds really basic, but in talking with our employees, sometimes they aren't sure. What are the company goals? What is the objective? Where does my job come into play? So whether they're out in the field or whether they're in the office, it kind of both applies there. And it can come down to hiring the right people. Are we asking the right questions? And sometimes we've got a hire that doesn't stick around, and that's just can be so frustrating. It wastes everybody's time. So are we presenting open-ended interview questions where we can understand how that applicant might succeed or not in our company in the future in different case scenarios? You know, so it's the interviewing. Are we hiring the right people? And then when they're in, do we have clarity in what they're responsible for? And are we is the leadership team holding themselves accountable, and are they holding the company accountable so that we can all move forward and have our jobs be profitable?
Technology does come in a pretty specific way, of course, when we're talking about our teams and building a company culture and having those processes that are already in place for our employees when they come in, and us having to teach them how to use the tools in the right manner in order to get the outcomes that we want and keep our projects profitable. What we see is when companies combine the right processes and the right systems with the right culture, that they actually get the real-time visibility and better outcomes in their projects at the end of the day. Okay, so we're going to have a little bit of time for lightning round, and we may ask for a little bit of audience participation in said lightning round. Are we ready? Are we ready? Yes. Okay. Okay, first question. Where do things break down in your processes? Audience, shout. Tom has a booming voice. Lack of accountability.
Lack of accountability as it relates to one person looking at a document, just never saw the other document. I didn't know you sent me the email, I didn't know I was supposed to follow up on it. And now there's a cost.
Yeah. I'm going to call names. Foley's, where do you see your biggest breakdowns in process?
I would say that as a growing company for us, it's people knowing their lane and their responsibilities. So as we've grown really, really fast. So in our office, it's hey, I thought you were going to do that. Oh, I thought he was going to do that. I thought you were going to do that. So for us right now, it's roles and responsibilities. And
Yeah.
because we're small and we're growing fast, a lot of the executive level and ownerships are wearing multiple hats.
Right?
So it's who's happy with that?
Yeah.
For us right now, where we're at in our state, that's the biggest breakdown for us.
Yeah, multiple hats. Communication. Yeah, that's a good one. Anybody else? Teams? CCS teams? Yeah. Joe?
I think
Chip? You too. You can share the mic.
I think approved change orders, delayed approved change orders from the owner results in subcontractors being disgruntled,
Right.
and that's a huge breakdown. I think subcontractors billing percentages that are overstated, and our people not catching that right then and there, and making sure that everybody's in agreement on the percentage that's being billed, just delays payment. I think subcontractors that submit pay apps without the complete information, everything that's needed, just delays the process, and if our people don't ask for that right then and there, it delays the process and unsatisfies the vendor. So the goal is to pay the vendors timely.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, you have to help the vendor. Hey, I need all the paperwork right now. This is what you're missing. And hey, look, this percentage of complete, maybe this is overstated. Let's walk the job and make sure we're all on the same page so we can get this approved. And the speedy approval process means speedy payments.
Right. Thank you. Okay, a little bit of a change in question of what is our breakdown today or that you're experiencing between field and office? How are you guys doing there with your teams and communication breakdowns between those areas? Somebody's getting voluntold.
Lack of communication and probably sense of urgency. Accounting wants it yesterday. The field's got a lot to do, and it's
Right.
understanding, like Annette said earlier, each other's goals
Right.
and having empathy. So I always try to start with, I appreciate everything you do, but I really need this. But yeah, I think it's communication and urgency,
Yeah.
that difference in mindset.
The stack of receipts in your back pocket does us no good. Right? Or stuffed in the seat of the car.
RedTeam makes it really easy, just take a picture.
Yes, yes. Take a picture with your mobile app. Upload your expenses. Question number 3. What's the hardest part to get right? People, processes, or technology? Put your hand down.
I think it comes down to people.
People.
Ultimately, the adaptability of change. Time after time here, I will think this is going to be a great program, but I'm not expecting my superintendents to modify their behavior because I love the person, but they're not adaptable to new processes and procedures. So technology doesn't drive change. People execute change. Technology is a function, in my opinion.
Yes, that's good. Does everybody agree with that? People?
You know, Joe said don't embarrass him. I've known you guys for 30 years. I knew when Mike started this thing and I think it's
You
lost.
knew
here.
Jen when she was a baby.
Yeah, that was the start of this thing, is personal contact. A little embarrassed to say that when you go on RedTeam, there's no telephone number to contact. You send an email, and it like goes up in the cloud, oh, I'm in the cloud. And, you know, there's some people like me who are 71 years old and love working with T&G. Had a great run and find RedTeam as a facilitator. Companies like W&J I work with and other companies, but they're not here now. And I'm disappointed that you guys cut a tree and it was hurt. It was a great opportunity, great program. I love it. I'd like to see more people involved.
Well, and that just goes to show, like, we're a very relational industry, right? Everything that we do is relational, whether it's relational with our employees in the office, relationships with our subcontractors, how we treat each other when we're on the job site together in order to get the project completed. So it is a relational industry. So I hear your feedback. Thank you so much.
Go ahead. Yeah. I'm not sure we can separate technology and process and people. I don't think that any one of them could survive without the other two. But I do think that the people are first. Because if you can have process and you can have technology, but if you don't have the people that understand and, like Kinsley said, appreciate their part in the dance and what their responsibility is, the technology is just going to sit on the desk. And the process, I think it's really important to mention that it has to come from the top down. That the owners and the management team have to practice what they preach. They have to set the example, and that culture has to come from the top down. Would you agree, Suzy?
I would, and I think also, I think Tom touched on it, like, we all have to adapt. And our owners and our, our young employees, our older employees, to all working together. They're growing up look very different. How it's different, and how I didn't do this, and now they have this. And so I think from a company standpoint, we set the tone of what's expected and what's the process, and then holding everybody accountable, no matter their age, no matter their role, whether they're in the field, whether they're in the office. It's just, that's the standard. And I think that's where we can improve also.
Yeah, I think that we see a lot in technology that we assume technology is the problem. It's too hard to learn. It's going to take too long to learn. I don't want to change processes. Go ahead, Traci.
I don't think the questions are the right questions. What's the purpose? I think technology is always changing.
Technology is always changing.
I've been in construction since 2015, but when I first started, Orange County, you could walk in with 3 hard sets of plans. There was no submitting on one. And you wanted to do a revision, you sat and sent somebody down there for 8 hours. So technology is always going to change. Coming from the Marine Corps, leadership, to your point, it starts at the top. The process is starts at the top. Your people are going to follow the leadership, and you have to lead by example. For us, I believe people. For me, for us in our company, I think people is the easiest thing because we're very selective about who we hire. We have the mindset of we can teach construction, we can teach technology. I can lead you in the process. I can't make you be ethical or moral or have a good work ethic.
Or attitude.
Those are the things you have or you don't have. So for us, as we've grown, we've had people come like, I've been in the industry for 20 years. I've worked for 5 huge general contractors and this and that. You're not the right fit for us. And it's not about your experience. It's about who you are as a person. Are you a good fit and building that culture? Because as leaders, we believe in ourselves that we can lead. We'll make the process, and we'll lead, and we'll take care of you. We're going to create a great
And I'm curious, when you're talking about your people and hiring people that are good company culture fits, what are some of the things that you guys look for at Foley when you're hiring your employees?
Well, I got all the time, so I'll let them all stop.
It really comes down to the character, the person in front of you. My questions aren't about your experience, they're about, tell me about you. And right away they want to talk about work and the things they've done and their skills, and I'm like, no, hold on, I want to hear about you. And the things that they'll say usually tell you if they're the right fit or not, right? Because it's a culture. And so a lot of it, yes. Can you hold yourself? Can you have a great conversation with someone and represent our company and represent and be part of this team and be a team player? Do you hold yourself accountable? Do you blame everyone else? These are small things that I think in conversation that you can get a vibe from someone sometimes. So we've got experienced people that we've hired, because you need that, absolutely, and we've hired very green in the industry, and it's all worked. So.
I was talking and doing a presentation with one of our clients in Nashville, Tennessee, TWC Constructors, and their CEO, Craig Fulcher, was saying that when he's looking to hire people and he's in an interview with them, he sends another person out to look at the car that they drove up in and look at the bumper stickers on the back and see like when they're out and about, they're going to be representing DWC. What are they going to be saying by not saying anything at all? How do they present themselves? What are they saying without saying a thing? And so, there are other ways that we can check for those individuals and what qualities do they possess that might be a great culture fit for our company, or maybe a cause for not being a good culture fit. He also spoke to having the accountant meet with them and see how their interaction goes, and really taking into consideration what the accountant brings back as, what did your gut feel say about how they answered questions and how you would interact with them? Are they going to be accountable? Are they going to be a team player and give you what you need on time? And so I thought that was a really interesting way in thinking about talking to your potential candidates for your position, to make sure they're a culture and they're going to be a culture fit, and making sure they're going to represent you in the way that you want to be represented on your brand in the world. So I think that was really interesting. Anyone else? Yeah.
Several of my clients have me interview potential, usually project accountants. And I was doing such just last week. And it's interesting because they know I'm a third party. They know that they're not going to be working for me. And they tend to open up. I can get them to talk. A little bit about experience. This one guy told me that, yeah, he loved